This is Captain Chris Myers of Central Florida Sight Fishing Charters. And when we're sight fishing the flats, probably the most important thing is casting. And too many people worry about what kind of lure or what kind of bait they have, and not if they can put that lure bait in front of the fish. Because it doesn't matter if you have the greatest bait that there is. If you don't put it in front of those fish, you're not going to catch them. I'm going to talk about today overhand casting versus sidearm casting. They're two totally different styles, and most people learned to overhand cast. Overhand casting is fine in some situations. Most of the time on the flats, we're casting sidearm. By sidearm, I mean totally sidearm or even a little below sidearm. So we're casting in a straight line and the lure never gets more than a foot or two above the surface. Most of the sight casting I do to fish that are within 30 to 50 feet from the boat, we're just flicking it out there, a little flick of the wrist, short. Now that's at least 50 feet away from the boat. The lure stays nice and low. It doesn't get slack in the line. It gets there quickly because it's going in a nice straight line. And because it's not so high up, it doesn't make as big of a splash when it lands. If we make that same cast overhand to those fish, not only do we have to drive the lure down into the water, so if I am casting overhand at a fish that is only 30 feet away, I made a big splash in the water and I probably scared that fish. So if I'm sight fishing, I need to be able to present it gently. And to present it gently, we need to, just a little flick is all it's going to take. Overhand casting, when I do it, is if I'm trying to reach out as far as I can get that lure. And when I'm doing that, I'm either casting in a perfectly straight line or just slightly up. I never want to cast in the rainbow. Because when I cast in a rainbow or a big arc, when my lure hits, all that arc falls down to the water as slack line. And if you look at my video on line management, you'll see what slack line will cause you big problems with knots in your braided line. So we want to avoid the rainbow cast. And the rainbow cast usually starts because the windup came way back here. Your windup never needs to come back here, because then it's too tempting to let go as you're going up. If I'm casting overhand, I stop here and I cast going out, and my release is as my rod is traveling out. So on my overhand cast, that thing flies in a straight line, maybe 10 to 12 feet above the water, and it'll get out much farther, but it's not something I use generally when I'm sight fishing unless I'm trying to hit some tailing fish a long distance away. Just like a lot of other tools, this fishing rod and reel are a tool. And just like a lot of other sports, such as baseball, golf, shooting a rifle, we can do these things one-handed. You know, we can all shoot our rifles one-handed. But you never see anybody that's trying to hit a small target aiming a rifle or shooting a rifle with one hand. You don't ever see a professional baseball player going up to swing his bat with one arm. They could hit the ball with one arm. We can throw our fishing rod with one hand and one arm. Two will always work better when we're going for accuracy. And out here sight fishing the flats, accuracy is king. It's much more important than what we're using. The objective is to get what it is we have in front of those fish and make the first shot count. So if I'm just haphazardly throwing it out there, I can get it away from the boat, but it has very little accuracy. I want to always use two hands. The bottom hand is what helps generate tip speed, which is what's going to get my lure away from that boat. Because a lot of times we're using light lures, a 1/4 ounce. I'm using this bottom hand to snap that tip around, because it's how fast I move that tip. It's not how big and strong I am. This is a simple lever. It's all about physics. We use that to snap the tip around, and with very little effort, we can get that thing to go super far. That's farther than I'm ever going to have to cast when I'm sight fishing on the flats. And you see I use very little effort. Now, especially if we have two people in the boat, but even if you're the only guy up here, there's a lot of times where the fish can be on your right hand side if you're right-handed. So I'm facing this way. If I'm fishing this direction, there's just as much chance the fish can be over here. Instead of me having to take my time and turn around and cast four-handed, sometimes it's faster just to fling a cast out backhand. Again, it's the same cast that I make to the forehand side. Here's my forehand grip. Here's my forehand stroke. I just make a little short flick using the bottom hand to pull the rod around. When I want to cast backhand, I'm using that same bottom hand, I'm just pulling it in the other direction. This way I'm pushing with my palm, this way I'm pulling with my fingers, and I help pull that tip around. And again, that lure should never go more than 10 feet off the surface. It never goes in an arc. And what's going to determine your accuracy is training yourself, trial and error, and learning when to release your finger. If you release it too early, it goes off to the right. If you release it too late, it'll go too far to the left. And when you do it just right, it goes exactly where you want. So when you're casting, try to learn and try to practice casting a sidearm stroke, because it will come in really handy when you're sight fishing out on the flats.